Thanks a lot, George. Pleasure to be here today. So when people hear the word Syria, these are the kind of images that usually come to mind. Sadly, it's been a country defined by the ugly war that has happened. Not to me, though. I know this particular place, and I had seen it in its more glorious past. This is Suq al-Medina in Aleppo. Syria is a country known for its beautiful ancient cities. This is my city, Damascus, which most people agree is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, famed across the world for its beautiful crusader castles. And the vibe before the war had started was actually quite positive in many aspects. There was this form of a cultural renaissance across the country. And when the sky did light up at night, it was mostly due to fireworks from all the different cultural festivals that were happening. Economically, things were doing so much better than before. You can see here GDP growing up until 2010, right before the war started. I was a part of the senior management team of the largest privately owned bank in the country, BBSF. And just a couple of months before the unrest began, we had to build a new building and a new financial hub that was being built outside the suburbs of Damascus. And there's a photo of me here with some of the board of director members. Really happy about this new purchase. We had lots of big plans for the bank, and I was really looking forward to my new office in the next coming few months. But that was not to happen. I would stay in my central Damascus office, and this would be my view in the earlier months. And things started becoming worse and worse with more uncertainty, and with that came less visibility, even in the literal sense. So we had political slogans wrapping our entire buildings, which blocked our view, and really blocked the view of how we were about to continue with our business. And what would the early sign of a major crisis be? We've seen it in London, we've seen it everywhere else. Queues. So whereas last year in London, we saw a lot of queues outside of supermarkets. In Syria, we saw them outside of banks. Syria was a cash-based society. People were scared for their money, and people queued outside the banks to withdraw with savings. Usually, a queue is a good thing for a business, but a nightmare for banks. Then things started becoming worse and worse. One day we're taking photos outside a branch when it snowed. Other days we took pictures, but for different reasons. And this is our flagship branch in Damascus. And that's when you probably started to see maps of Syria, and then updates from the BBC showing how the fighting was evolving on the ground. To us, though, the map of Syria wasn't just something on the newsreel. It was really the blueprint of our operations. So all of these little blue boxes refer to branches that we had across the country. So increasing colossal challenges on the ground meant increasing difficulties for us to manage our operations and protecting the deposits of our customers. So what do? As we sat there in the board meeting room, me and my colleagues with a giant map of Syria looming behind us, we had lots of questions to answer. How do we face this crisis? Honestly, initially I had no idea. This was something completely new to us. This came almost out of nowhere, and we were just not prepared for it. So initially, we were just all over the place, scrambling, unsure how best to handle this. But with a lot of mistakes on the way, and a really steep learning curve, and lots of trial and error, we we uh, we found that there were certain principles that if we that when applied, improve the chances of one thriving and doing good in a crisis, no matter what. So after 4 years of operating and being part of the management team of the largest bank in Syria, what many people think was probably the hardest place in the world to do business in, I decided to write a book and to highlight the principles that I learned working in this crisis. And in this talk, I wanted to share a few of the lessons that I had learned. So people have different kinds of business heroes. My business hero is this Syrian food seller. Just notice all of the different details. Notice how neatly lined up all the oranges are compared to the rubble behind them. Look at the details of the bananas. These are not normal bananas. They're labeled as premium bananas because why would anyone settle for anything else, even in such a war zone? Look how dignified he is standing there, as if there isn't a war in the world, and so casually going on with his life. So if this guy was so bold and able to pursue opportunities no matter what, we probably had no excuse not to. And again, to remind everyone, this was a context that was becoming more and more difficult by the day. So this would be the view of my daily commute every day to my office, random bombs all over the city, and actual damage happening to a lot of our branches. So this would be an image of one of our branches in Damascus, and outside of the capital city, we had the cases where entire branches were being completely rampaged. And again, this very sad, horrendous loss of life and the terrible consequences of the war is just something so sad and so big, and for us as a business, it was so easy to have this feeling of general disbelief wash us away, and to have this narrative dominate the landscape. And no matter how grim it was and how tempting it was to just lose faith and hope, we tried our best to pursue opportunities no matter what, and to find opportunities in places that were probably doing better than other places. So the UK media ran a report during the early years of the war. They were sort of surprised that there were, and they saw people in the souk buying candies and people clinging to normalcy. And what I think people learn now during the pandemic is that during a crisis, people probably cling to normalcy and crave it more. So yes, I mean, life needed to move on, and yes, there was a lot of bad things happening, but that doesn't mean that this would dominate the entire landscape. So when electric power stations were demolished in the country, and many bankers literally saw the dark side of things, we saw maybe an opportunity to finance solar energy. When many withdrew their money from banks and turned them into gold, we found an opportunity to maybe bring back part of that wealth in a different form and store them in the bank in the form of safety deposit boxes. So the overriding idea was not to let the feeling of a pending doom rein in, and to be bold in pursuing opportunities no matter what. Second thing is to build genuine trust with really all of your stakeholders, staff, customers, everyone. So earlier I had showed an image of people queuing outside of banks, but I can assure you that it's a lot scarier when you're viewing it from inside the bank 10 minutes before opening time, when you're in charge of operations. What would we do? most the other banks decided to impose daily limits, to delay withdrawals, to maybe tell people not to panic. And if someone wanted to withdraw £1,000, they would tell them to withdraw 100 today, 100 next week, and so on. Would we do that? Would we tell the people that not to panic and that everything is going to be all right? Would we really take measures that would probably make our operations a lot easier, but would probably erode confidence in the long run? So we decided to do something completely different. People will panic, and who are we to know something about the crisis that they didn't know? We would not give them a false sense of assurance that the crisis was going away. What we did is that we were accommodating. We may have exaggeratedly maybe stacked our banknotes. We had plenty of money, and we had nothing to hide. We wanted everyone to see that, and I think the fact that we did that and that we simply gave people what they had wanted during a time of a panic, that helped build genuine trust. And what happened is that a few months down the line, banks that had delayed withdrawals, their depositors ended up bringing their cash back to us, which I think is due to the fact that we took measures that instill a genuine trust. And we learned a very key principle. Maybe in normal times, if you try to outsmart people, they might politely decline and say no. But in a crisis, they'll come to hate you. And when it came to something as valuable and as sacred to someone as their lifelong savings, we were not gonna outsmart them. And I think these are the kind of things that build trust in the long run. Same thing with our staff. What's the easiest thing to do in a crisis? Cut costs. It is the easiest thing to do. It is the most tempting route to fulfill targets. It's a lot easier than increasing revenue, than thinking of ways to optimize operations. But we resisted that. It was so easy to get sucked up in that cycle where we're trying to really fulfill year-end targets, year-end metrics that will maybe cause short-term causes for celebration, but would end up eroding capabilities along the way. Yes, they would maybe save a buck here and there, but these would end up demotivating staff along the way. And we would not divert our energy on saving costs rather than optimizing revenue. People know whether you chose to take the convenient route of just across the board abrupt cost cutting, or more difficult but strategically rewarding routes. We tried our best not to get tempted by that very appealing, the very convenient route, and I think that this is really what builds trust genuinely. So just a couple of examples. Sorry. So again, and again, I'm just bringing that slide one more time. If you try to outsmart people, even your staff, all stakeholders involved, in normal times they might politely resist. In a crisis, they'll come to hate you. Third thing that I want to talk about: get things done. I mean, just as you can imagine, this was a crisis. We had to do a lot of press releases, a lot of general assemblies, lots of key messaging taking place there. But we knew at the end of the day that it was action that speaks louder than words. So I mean, so just a little history of the bank. It's called BANQUE BEMO SAUDI FRANSI, which was formed by Saudi bank and a Lebanese bank. And as you can see here, not a lot of effort was maybe put fit into the branding. We simply took the name of the Saudi bank, merged it with the logo of the Lebanese BANQUE BEMO, and we ended up with our logo, BANQUE BEMO SAUDI FRANسي. Now imagine, amidst the crisis and all of the challenges happening, our founder, the Saudi Arabian bank, decided out of nowhere, without us knowing, and by the way, my mother found out before I did on the news that they suddenly decided to abandon us. Now, just imagine, like, over and above all the colossal challenges that we were facing, the last thing we needed now was an identity dilemma. I mean, three of our four boards almost correspond to that founder's name, and we really worried that this would cause branding and lots of challenges in our identity. But then we realized that even something as central as our name didn't matter so much. In a crisis, they say that talk is cheap, and what we learned is that as action becomes harder, talk becomes even cheaper. Your actions and what you do in the crisis define you more than anything else, even your own name. The fact that we were doing what we're meant to do, that we were giving the people what they want, that we were safeguarding their deposits, was 100 times better than having a better name. So it was really better to have an irrelevant name, but have cash for our clients and doing what we're meant to do, than be called the most liquid Syrian bank, but not have any cash. And by the way, I mean, 6 years later, the bank has still kept its name unchanged, even as that main founder did not return back to the bank. And same thing with staff. I mean, there was lots of fuel shortages in the country. People were finding it really hard to come to work. Less preaching and more actual problem solving mattered to us. So rather than a lot of messaging going out, we actually tried to solve the problem at the root. We brought along lots of buses, and we did take care of transporting staff of everyone every day. And we took a step further. When we had space on the buses, we actually transported staff of other banks as well with us. We had besieged cities. How do you engage and motivate with staff in besieged cities? We launched an online banking simulation game. Nothing would stop us from engaging with staff, not even a besiegement of a city. And I do remember talking to the CEO of this Finnish simulation company, telling her that we were in Syria, and we were trying to do this. Initially, he thought someone was maybe pranking him, and that it was a faceless joke, but it wasn't. And I think these things help instill genuine trust. Fourth thing is to be strategic yet very close to the ground. So even if you don't know anything about banking or the geography of Damascus, just by looking at this map, the boxes are branches, and you can see the political context around us. Not easy at all to plan in such situations. So we had an actual challenge initially. Where do we place our backup server? So initially, in the first year, Aleppo was the safest city in Syria, and it made sense to us to place the main server there. But then Aleppo, and this was Aleppo in the planning phase. But then later on, out of nowhere, Aleppo sadly became synonymous with a city known for its very sad destruction, and it turned into the epicenter of the war. So, and we realized that no matter how much we planned, unforeseen things will happen. So how on earth do you run operations in such a context? And with the time, we learned that the main principle was to be very unswerving on the vision, yet very flexible in the tactics. So yes, we were not able to know which branch would be at greatest risk. This was beyond our control. But what we could do, and what was within our control, is to embed very robust continuity plans and operate our branches in such a way where within a very short period of time, we could protect and safeguard our staff, our customers, and our assets. So the key principle was to create a lot of buffers and a lot of alternative channels. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is to be driven by the long term. Now, this might seem like a very cliche thing to say, but it's really key and then really vital, and to focus on your critical success factors. Initially in the war, we had a flawed approach. We were asking, things and questions that we didn't really have control on. When would the war end? Will the US interfere? How will this unfold? And by the way, this was 10 years ago, almost now to the day. And the questions that we had 10 years ago, even today, many of them are still unanswered. But with time, we learned that it was better to actually instead focus on the things that we could control. So rather than asking questions about the war's timeline, we asked what are our critical success factors, i.e., what are the things that we needed to excel at in order to remain competitive, and how are these relevant today, tomorrow, regardless of how long the war takes or how things would evolve. And we realized that yes, war is destructive, and it can and did destroy up to a quarter of our branches. But even the worst war in modern times did not destroy the dynamics of our industry. There were really three basic things that we needed to excel at: trust, liquidity, ability to lend in a competitive way. No matter what happens, no matter the timeline of the war, people trusting in a bank would always be a critical success factor, and maybe more so during a war. So we made sure that we were laser focused in building capacity in these areas over almost everything else, even profitability. Get these right, everything else eventually falls into place. If you don't, almost anything else you do won't matter. And our usual metrics maybe fell behind in the first year or so, but we never allowed year-end targets to hinder us from building capabilities. A few years later, we became the undisputed leader across almost all metrics. And just to wrap up here, just if I were to leave one small note, is that the mindset is essential. No matter how tough it becomes, never allow the feeling of impending doom to reign in. Thanks a lot.